The stars burned brightly in the sky, but Captain Elias Vane could barely see them through the smoke and debris surrounding him. His ship, the Eclipse Dawn, had been humanity's last hope, a state-of-the-art warship equipped with advanced weaponry and shields designed to withstand even the most brutal attacks. Yet now, it was nothing more than a smoldering wreck adrift in the cold void of space. The battle against the Krill Empire had raged for hours. The Krill were ruthless beings, tall, insectoid creatures with chitinous exoskeletons that gleamed like polished steel under starlight. Their empire spanned countless systems, and they ruled with an iron claw, enslaving weaker species and stripping their planets bare of resources. Humanity had once stood strong against them, but years of conflict had taken their toll. Now Earth's defenses were crumbling, its colonies scattered or destroyed. Elias gripped the controls of his escape pod as alarms blared around him. The bridge of the Eclipse Dawn had erupted into chaos when the Krill flagship unleashed a devastating barrage of plasma cannons. One by one, his crewmates fell, some vaporized instantly, others crushed beneath collapsing bulkheads. He remembered shouting orders, trying desperately to rally what remained of his team, but there was no stopping the inevitable. As the hull breach sealed off the command center, Elias made the decision to abandon ship. With trembling hands, he activated the ejection sequence. The pod shot away from the dying vessel just seconds before it exploded in a fiery burst of light. For a moment, Elias felt weightless, suspended between life and death, as the wreckage of his former home drifted farther behind him. Then gravity returned with a jolt as the pod entered the atmosphere of a nearby planet. The descent was rough. The pod tumbled end over end, its heat shield glowing red-hot as friction tore at its surface. Inside, Elias braced himself against the buckling walls, gritting his teeth as the world outside turned into a blur of fire and ash. When the impact finally came, it sent shockwaves rippling through his body. Darkness claimed him almost immediately. When Elias woke, his head throbbed and his vision swam. Sand clung to every inch of his skin, gritty and unforgiving. He pushed himself up slowly, wincing at the sharp pain in his ribs. His uniform was torn and singed, but otherwise, he seemed intact. Taking stock of his surroundings, he realized he'd landed on a barren desert planet. The horizon stretched endlessly in all directions, dotted only by jagged rock formations and swirling dust devils. There were no signs of civilization, no evidence of water or vegetation. Just emptiness. But something caught his eye, a faint glimmer on the edge of the landscape. It wasn't natural. It pulsed rhythmically, like a beacon calling out to him. Curiosity outweighed caution, and Elias began trudging toward it, each step stirring clouds of fine sand. Hours passed before he reached the source, a massive structure buried partially beneath the dunes. Its metallic surface gleamed despite centuries of neglect, etched with strange symbols that seemed to shift when viewed from different angles. Carefully, Elias approached the entrance, which yawned open like a predator's maw. The air inside was cool and stale, carrying a faint hum of machinery. As he ventured deeper, the darkness gave way to dim blue lights lining the walls. The corridor twisted and turned, leading him to a chamber unlike anything he'd ever seen. Rows upon rows of glass pods lined the room, each containing a living being. Some were humanoid, while others bore features so alien they defied comprehension. All of them appeared unconscious, suspended in stasis. Then he heard movement. A low growl echoed through the chamber, followed by the unmistakable sound of footsteps. From the shadows emerged three figures, guardians of this place. They were Krill soldiers, their exoskeletons reinforced with armor plating, their mandibles clicking ominously as they spotted him. Elias froze, knowing he was outnumbered and unarmed. But then, one of the pods shattered suddenly, releasing a torrent of liquid and gas. Out stepped a figure, a young alien girl with delicate wings folded tightly against her back. Her eyes locked onto Elias, wide with fear and confusion. Behind her, two more pods opened, revealing additional captives. Another girl whose skin shimmered with bioluminescent patterns, and a third with scales that shimmered like emeralds. The krill guards lunged forward, weapons raised, but Elias acted instinctively. Grabbing a piece of broken glass from the shattered pod, he hurled it at the nearest guard, striking true. Chaos erupted. The winged girl darted upward, using her wings to knock another guard off balance. The shimmering girl emitted a soft glow that disoriented the remaining enemies, while the scaled warrior Snarl Dian tackled the final guard to the ground. Within moments, the threat was neutralized. Breathing heavily, Elias turned to face the trio. "Who are you?" he asked, his voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through his veins. The winged girl hesitated, then spoke in halting but clear galactic standard. We are prisoners, taken from our homes. You are human." "Yes," Elias replied, "and I'm here to help you escape." For the first time since the battle, Elias felt a flicker of purpose ignite within him. These girls weren't just victims. They were survivors, like him. Together, they might stand a chance against the Krill Empire. And perhaps, just perhaps, they could find a way to reclaim not only their freedom, but also hope for the future. As the group regrouped, Elias couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning of something much larger than himself. Little did he know, their journey would change the fate of countless worlds and redefine what it meant to be truly free. The chamber was silent except for the soft hum of machinery and the occasional crackle of broken glass underfoot. Elias stood surrounded by 3 alien girls, each watching him with a mix of curiosity and caution. They had just witnessed him fight alongside them against their captors, but trust wasn't something that came easily after years of oppression. "I'm Captain Elias Vane," he said slowly, his tone calm and deliberate. "I'm human. You don't need to be afraid. I'm not here to hurt you." The winged girl tilted her head slightly, studying him with piercing eyes. Her wings twitched nervously behind her back as she spoke again in halting galactic standard. "You saved us. Why?" Elias hesitated before answering. He didn't fully understand why himself. Maybe it was instinct, maybe desperation, or maybe it was the lingering guilt of surviving when so many others hadn't. But deep down, he knew one thing for certain. These girls deserved better than this life of captivity. "Because no one should live like this," he replied honestly, "and because I think we can help each other." The shimmering girl stepped forward cautiously, her bioluminescent patterns flickering faintly across her skin. She gestured toward the rows of stasis pods lining the walls. "Many more are trapped here. We cannot leave without freeing them." Her voice carried an authority that surprised Elias despite its gentle tone. Clearly, she was used to leadership, or at least responsibility, in whatever world she'd come from. "And then what?" asked the scaled warrior, crossing her arms over her chest. Her sharp gaze never left Elias. "Even if we free everyone, how do we escape? The krill will hunt us down." "She's right," Elias admitted. "We'll need a plan. But first, let me get to know who I'm working with. Names would be a good start." The winged girl hesitated before speaking. "I am Ayla." The shimmering one nodded next. "Zinara." Finally, the scaled warrior grunted. "Tikara." "Well, Ayla, Zinara, Tikara," Elias said, giving them a small smile. "It looks like we're stuck together for now. Let's see what we can accomplish." Over the next few hours, the group worked methodically to sabotage the facility while learning about each other's abilities. Ayla proved invaluable thanks to her wings. She could glide effortlessly through ventilation shafts too narrow for anyone else to navigate. With her help, they located key areas of the complex, a power core room, security hubs, and storage rooms filled with weapons and supplies. Zinara, on the other hand, possessed a unique talent that fascinated Elias. When she concentrated, her body emitted pulses of calming light that seemed to soothe even the most agitated minds. During one tense moment when a patrol of Krill guards approached dangerously close, Zenera closed her eyes and radiated a soft glow. The guards paused mid-step, momentarily disoriented, allowing the group to slip away unnoticed. Tira's strength became evident during their encounters with automated defense systems. Once, when a robotic sentry cornered them in a corridor, she charged forward without hesitation, ripping its mechanical limbs apart with raw power. Her ferocity reminded Elias of Earth's ancient warriors, fierce, unyielding, and utterly determined. As they moved through the labyrinthine facility, Elias began piecing together fragments of information from the captured aliens' memories. Each pod contained data logs detailing where the prisoners had been taken from and why. Ayla explained that her people hailed from a planet called Arian, known for its floating cities suspended among endless skies. The Krill had invaded Arian decades ago, enslaving thousands and forcing them to mine rare minerals embedded in the clouds. Zenera's homeworld, Lumina, had fared no better. Beneath its shimmering oceans lay vast deposits of energy crystals coveted by the Krill Empire. Entire underwater cities were razed, their inhabitants either killed or imprisoned. Zenera herself had been a scientist before her capture, studying ways to harness the natural luminescence of her species for peaceful purposes. Tikera remained tight-lipped about her origins, offering only vague details about her planet being scorched by Krill weaponry until nothing remained but ash. Yet Elias sensed there was more to her story, pain buried beneath layers of anger and pride. Despite their differences, the trio shared a common bond: resilience. Each had endured unimaginable hardships, yet refused to give up hope entirely. Their determination inspired Elias in ways he hadn't expected. For years, he'd fought battles out of duty rather than conviction, haunted by failures and losses. Now, surrounded by these young women who still dared to dream of freedom, he found himself rekindling a sense of purpose. One evening, as they rested briefly in a hidden alcove, Elias decided to share some of his own history. Sitting cross-legged on the cold metal floor, he recounted tales of humanity's struggles against the Krill Empire. He spoke of Earth's once thriving cities reduced to rubble, its people scattered across distant colonies clinging to survival. He described the countless lives lost, not just soldiers but civilians caught in the crossfire, and the weight of guilt he carried for surviving when so many hadn't. Ayla listened intently, her large eyes reflecting sympathy. "You carry much sorrow," she murmured softly, "but you also carry hope. That is why you fight." Zenera nodded in agreement. Hope is powerful. It keeps us alive even when all seems lost. Tikera, however, remained skeptical. "Hope means nothing without action," she growled. "Words alone won't save us." "You're right," Elias acknowledged. "That's why we're going to act. Together." With renewed resolve, the group finalized their escape plan. Using Ayla's reconnaissance skills, they identified weak points in the facility's defenses. Zenera devised a way to disable surveillance drones temporarily using her light pulses, while Tikera prepared to lead charges against any physical threats. Elias focused on gathering weapons and tools scavenged from supply closets, ensuring they'd have everything needed for the breakout. By dawn, they were ready. Standing shoulder to shoulder in the dimly lit corridor leading to the main exit, Elias turned to face his newfound allies. "This isn't just about escaping," he said firmly. "It's about showing the Krill, and every other oppressed species, that resistance is possible. If we succeed tonight, we won't just free ourselves. We'll inspire others to rise up." Ayla smiled faintly, her wings unfurling slightly as if eager to take flight. Zenera's patterns brightened with determination, while Tikera cracked her knuckles menacingly. For the first time since meeting them, Elias felt truly united with these strangers-turned-comrades. The plan was simple: execute it under cover of darkness, move swiftly, and trust each other completely. Yet, as Elias and the alien girls prepared to put their strategy into action, none of them could shake the feeling that things rarely went according to plan in situations like this. Still, They had no choice but to try. Ayla led the way, her wings gliding silently above the group as she scouted ahead through narrow ventilation shafts. Below, Zinera's bioluminescent patterns dimmed to a faint glow, allowing her to guide the others without drawing attention. Tikara brought up the rear, her sharp eyes scanning every shadow for signs of danger. Elias carried a makeshift arsenal of scavenged weapons, plasma cutters, stun rods, and a few grenades rigged from spare parts found in the storage rooms. Each piece of equipment felt heavy in his hands, not just because of its weight, but because failure meant certain death or recapture. They moved cautiously through the labyrinthine corridors of the facility, avoiding patrols of Krill soldiers and automated sentries. The air grew colder the closer they got to the main exit, a reminder that freedom was tantalizingly near yet still out of reach. Every step forward filled Elias with both hope and dread. Finally, they'd reached the central control room, a massive chamber dominated by towering consoles and holographic displays. This was the nerve center of the entire operation, where the Krill monitored prisoners, managed security systems, and coordinated supply shipments back to their empire. If they could disable the power core housed here, it would plunge the facility into chaos, giving them a chance to slip away unnoticed. Elias signaled for silence as he approached the door. Ayla landed softly beside him, her feathers ruffling slightly in anticipation. "Two guards inside," she whispered, "both armed. Can you distract them?" Elias asked quietly. Ayla hesitated for a moment before nodding. "I will do what I must." Without another word, she spread her wings and took flight, disappearing into the shadows above the doorway. Moments later, a soft rustling sound echoed down the corridor, followed by shouts of alarm from within the control room. The guards rushed out, weapons drawn, searching for the source of the disturbance. As soon as they were clear of the entrance, Zinera stepped forward, her body glowing faintly as she emitted a pulse of calming light. The guards froze mid-step, momentarily disoriented. Seizing the opportunity, Tikara charged past Elias, her scaled fists striking with precision. Within seconds, both guards were incapacitated, slumped unconscious against the wall. Elias hurried inside, quickly locating the power core, a pulsating sphere of energy encased in reinforced glass. He worked feverishly to disable it, using tools scavenged earlier to reroute circuits and overload the system. As sparks flew and alarms began blaring throughout the facility, the group regrouped outside the control room. Chaos erupted instantly. Red lights flashed, klaxons wailed, and Krill reinforcements poured into the corridors, shouting orders in their guttural language. The escape route ahead suddenly seemed impossibly dangerous. "We have to move now," Elias shouted over the din. "Stick together." They sprinted down the hallway, dodging bursts of plasma fire from pursuing soldiers. Ayla soared overhead, guiding them toward an emergency access tunnel that led to the surface. But just as they neared the entrance, a squad of elite Krill warriors blocked their path, their exoskeletons gleaming menacingly in the strobing red light. "There's too many," Zinera cried, her voice tinged with panic. "I'll hold them off," Tikara growled, stepping forward with determination etched across her face. "Go." "No," Elias protested. "We don't leave anyone behind." But Tikara ignored him, charging straight at the enemy with a ferocious roar. Her claws slashed through armor, sending Krill warriors stumbling backward. For a brief moment, it looked like she might actually break through their ranks. Then one of the soldiers fired a concentrated beam of energy, striking her squarely in the chest. She fell to her knees, clutching the wound as blood seeped between her fingers. "Ayla, get us out of here," Elias yelled, grabbing Zinera's arm and pulling her toward the tunnel. His heart sank as he realized what had to happen next. Turning back, he faced Ayla, who hovered uncertainly above the fray. "You need to create a diversion. Draw them away so we can escape." Tears welled up in Ayla's large eyes. "But do it," Elias commanded, his tone leaving no room for argument. "Trust me, We'll come back for you." With a final glance at her fallen comrade and the humans fleeing into the tunnel, Ayla nodded grimly. She flapped her wings powerfully, rising higher into the air before diving straight at the Krill forces. Her sudden appearance startled them, forcing them to redirect their focus. Plasma bolts streaked past her as she darted erratically, luring the soldiers deeper into the facility. Inside the tunnel, Elias and Zenara ran as fast as their legs would carry them, the sounds of battle fading behind them. Guilt weighed heavily on Elias's shoulders. He'd promised not to leave anyone behind. Yet here he was, abandoning Ayla to save himself and Zenara. But deep down, he knew it wasn't abandonment. It was strategy. They needed to survive long enough to mount a rescue mission. When they finally emerged onto the surface, the desert stretched endlessly before them, bathed in the pale light of twin moons. Behind them, the facility buzzed with activity as Krill drones scanned the horizon for any sign of the escaped prisoners. Exhausted and heartsick, Elias sank to his knees, staring back at the distant structure. "We'll get her back," Zenara said softly, placing a hand on his shoulder. Her luminescent patterns flickered gently, offering comfort in the form of warmth and reassurance. "She gave us a chance. Now it's our turn to give her one." Elias nodded, clenching his fists tightly. "You're right. We owe her that much, and more." For several minutes they rested, catching their breath and gathering their thoughts. The night was cold, and the wind carried whispers of sand across the barren landscape. Despite everything they'd been through, Elias couldn't help but marvel at how far they'd come since crashing on this desolate planet. What had started as a desperate bid for survival had transformed into something greater, a shared purpose driven by courage, sacrifice, and hope. As dawn broke over the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and gold, Elias stood up, resolve hardening in his gaze. "Let's find shelter and regroup. Once we're ready, we'll go back for Ayla and take down whoever stands in our way." Zenara nodded, her patterns brightening with renewed determination. Together, they set off into the desert, leaving footprints in the sand that would soon be erased by time. But the bond they'd formed, the unspoken promise to protect one another, would endure far longer than any trace of their passage. Little did they know, the journey ahead would test them in ways they couldn't yet imagine. Yet even in the face of overwhelming odds, they held on to one truth. Unity made them stronger. And strength, when wielded with purpose, could change the course of destiny itself. The desert stretched endlessly before them, its golden dunes shimmering under the twin suns that rose steadily into the sky. Elias and Zenara trudged forward, their bodies weary but their spirits unbroken. The weight of leaving Ayla behind pressed heavily on Elias's mind, but he forced himself to focus on the task at hand, finding shelter and formulating a plan to rescue her. As they walked, Zenara occasionally paused to examine strange markings etched into rocks or faint trails left by creatures long gone. Her bioluminescent patterns flickered softly, almost as if she were communicating silently with the ancient landscape. Though exhausted, she remained vigilant, her sharp eyes scanning for any sign of danger or salvation. Hours passed without respite. The heat grew oppressive, sapping their strength with every step. Just when it seemed like they might collapse from exhaustion, Zenara pointed toward a jagged cliff face rising abruptly from the sands. "There," she said, her voice steady despite the fatigue evident in her posture. "Something is there." Elias squinted against the glare of the suns. At first glance, the cliff appeared no different from the countless others they'd seen during their trek. But as they drew closer, subtle details emerged, an unnatural symmetry to the rock formations, faint grooves carved into the stone that hinted at deliberate design. It wasn't until they reached the base of the cliff that they discovered the entrance, a narrow fissure barely wide enough for a person to squeeze through. Without hesitation, Elias led the way inside. The air immediately cooled, carrying the scent of damp earth and something metallic. Dim blue lights embedded in the walls illuminated the passage, casting eerie shadows that danced across the rough-hewn surfaces. The deeper they ventured, the more apparent it became that this was no natural cave. It was a relic of an ancient civilization. The tunnels eventually opened into a vast chamber filled with crumbling structures and artifacts scattered haphazardly across the floor. Some items were clearly technological, cracked screens, rusted machinery, but others defied explanation, resembling sculptures made of crystalline material that pulsed faintly with an inner light. In the center of the room stood a pedestal adorned with intricate carvings, upon which rested a small, spherical device. Zenara approached cautiously, her patterns glowing brighter as she examined the object. "This feels familiar," she murmured, running her fingers lightly over the surface. "My people once studied similar technology. It may hold answers." Elias joined her, peering curiously at the sphere. "Can you figure out what it does?" She hesitated, then nodded. "I can try, but it will take time." Time was something they didn't have much of. Still, they couldn't afford to ignore such a discovery, not when it might provide the edge they needed to defeat the Krill. While Zenara worked on deciphering the artifact, Elias explored the rest of the chamber, searching for anything else useful. He found caches of preserved food wrapped in biodegradable containers, tools crafted from unknown materials, and even rudimentary weapons designed for close combat. Meanwhile, Tira's sacrifice weighed heavily on his thoughts. She had fought valiantly, buying them precious seconds to escape. Had she survived? Or had she fallen victim to the Krill's brutality? And what about Ayla? Was she still alive, enduring unimaginable hardships while waiting for rescue? His musings were interrupted by Zenara's voice echoing through the chamber. "Elias, come quickly." He rushed back to find her standing beside the pedestal, her expression a mixture of awe and concern. The sphere now floated slightly above the surface, spinning slowly as streams of data projected outward in holographic displays. Zenara gestured toward one particular sequence. "This language, it's similar to ours. I think I understand fragments of it." "What does it say?" Elias asked eagerly. "It speaks of a weapon," Zenara replied, her tone cautious. "A quantum disruptor capable of disabling entire fleets. If we can activate it, we could cripple the Krill Empire's operations across the galaxy." Elias felt a surge of hope, but also trepidation. Such power came with risks, and using it would require precision and planning. "Where is this disruptor?" he asked. Zenara pointed to another section of the hologram. "It's aboard a space station orbiting this planet, but accessing it won't be easy. The station is heavily guarded." "Then we'll need reinforcements," Elias declared firmly. "We can't do this alone." Over the next few days, they prepared for the journey ahead. Zenara continued studying the artifact, piecing together fragments of knowledge that revealed not only the location of the disruptor, but also potential weaknesses in the Krill defenses. Meanwhile, Elias focused on training himself physically and mentally, honing his skills with the scavenged weapons and practicing strategies for guerrilla warfare. One evening, as they sat together amidst the ruins, Elias turned to Zenara. "Tell me more about your world," he said gently. "What was it like before the Krill invaded?" Zenara hesitated, her patterns dimming slightly as memories surfaced. "Lumina was beautiful," she began softly. "Our cities floated beneath the waves, lit by the glow of energy crystals harvested sustainably from the ocean floor. We lived in harmony with nature, sharing knowledge freely among our people. When the Krill came, they destroyed everything: our homes, our families, our way of life. They took what they wanted and left nothing behind." Her words stirred anger within Elias, but also admiration for her resilience. Despite everything she'd lost, she still carried hope for a better future. "We'll make them pay," he vowed quietly. "Not just for Lumina, but for all the worlds they've ruined." Zenara smiled faintly, her patterns brightening again. "Thank you, Elias, for believing in us." Their bond deepened over shared moments of vulnerability and determination. Together, they pored over maps and schematics, devising plans for infiltrating the space station and retrieving the disruptor. Yet both knew the mission would require more than strategy. They'd need allies willing to risk everything alongside them. When they finally emerged from the caves, the desert awaited them once more. This time, however, they weren't alone. During their exploration of the ruins, they'd encountered remnants of other oppressed species hiding in nearby oases, survivors who had fled the Krill's wrath and now eked out a meager existence in the harsh environment. Inspired by Elias and Zenera's resolve, these groups agreed to join forces, united by a common goal: freedom. Among them was a young engineer named Kel, whose expertise proved invaluable in repairing damaged equipment and fabricating new tools. There was also Mira, a scout with unparalleled tracking skills, and Dax, a former soldier whose tactical knowledge complemented Elias's own experience. Slowly but surely, a Ragdig army began to form, bolstered by stories of Ayla's bravery and Tikera's sacrifice. As they marched toward the horizon, guided by the coordinates provided by the artifact, Elias felt a renewed sense of purpose. They weren't just fighting for themselves anymore. They were fighting for every being enslaved by the Krill Empire. And though the road ahead promised countless challenges, he knew one thing for certain: with unity and courage, they could spark change. The journey to the Krill facility where Ayla was being held felt like an eternity. Elias led the group with a mix of determination and desperation, his mind consumed by thoughts of her captivity. Every step forward brought both hope and dread: hope that they would find her alive, and dread at what they might encounter along the way. By now, their Ragdig army had grown significantly. Refugees from scattered settlements joined them, inspired by tales of resistance against the Krill Empire. Among them were skilled fighters, engineers, and strategists who brought valuable expertise to the mission. Yet despite their growing numbers, Elias couldn't shake the feeling that this operation hinged on more than just numbers. It required precision, stealth, and sheer willpower. As they approached the outskirts of the facility under cover of darkness, Elias addressed the group one final time. "This is it," he said, his voice firm but filled with emotion. "We're here for Ayla, and for every being enslaved by the Krill. Stay sharp, stay focused, and remember why we're doing this." Zenera stood beside him, her bioluminescent patterns glowing faintly in solidarity. "For freedom," she added softly, echoing his sentiment. The others nodded silently, their resolve unwavering. The infiltration began without incident. Using Mira's tracking skills, they identified weak points in the perimeter defenses, a series of blind spots created by overlapping sensor grids. Dax, the former soldier, coordinated the initial breach, directing small teams to disable key security systems while avoiding detection. Meanwhile, Elias, Zenara, and Kale moved swiftly toward the detention block where Ayla was believed to be held. Inside the facility, tension hung thick in the air. The corridors were eerily quiet except for the occasional hum of machinery and the distant clanking of Krill armor. Shadows danced across the walls as they navigated through dimly lit passageways, relying on Zenera's calming light pulses to mask their presence whenever patrols drew near. Finally, they reached the detention area, a grim maze of cells filled with prisoners too broken to resist. Many stared blankly at the intruders, their eyes hollow with despair. Others whispered words of gratitude, though few dared to speak aloud for fear of retaliation. Elias scanned the rows of cells until his gaze landed on a familiar figure slumped against the back wall of one enclosure. "Ayla," he called out, rushing to the cell door. Her wings were folded tightly around her body, shielding her from view, but there was no mistaking those delicate features framed by silvery hair. She looked up weakly, her large eyes widening in disbelief. "Elias, you came back." "Of course I did," he replied, forcing a reassuring smile despite the turmoil inside him. He worked quickly to unlock the cell using tools scavenged earlier, his hands trembling slightly with urgency. Once the door slid open, Ayla stumbled into his arms, her frail frame shaking with exhaustion, or perhaps relief. "We need to move," Zenera urged quietly, glancing over her shoulder. "They'll know something's wrong soon." Elias nodded, helping Ayla steady herself. "Can you walk?" She hesitated before nodding weakly. "I'll manage." But as they turned to leave, the sound of heavy footsteps echoed down the corridor. A squad of Krill soldiers appeared, weapons drawn and mandibles clicking ominously. Behind them stood a towering figure clad in ornate armor, the facility commander himself. "You've caused enough trouble, human," the commander growled, his voice dripping with disdain. "Your rebellion ends here." Elias stepped protectively in front of Ayla, gripping a plasma cutter tightly. "Not today." Without warning, chaos erupted. Terra's allies launched a diversionary attack elsewhere in the facility, drawing most of the guards away from the detention block. This gave Elias and his team precious seconds to act. Zenara emitted a blinding pulse of light, disorienting the remaining soldiers long enough for Kel to hack into the nearby control panel and seal the doors behind them. The commander, however, wasn't so easily deterred. With a roar of fury, he charged forward, his claws slashing through the air. Elias dodged instinctively, countering with a swift strike aimed at the Krill's exposed joints. The battle was fierce, each exchange of blows testing Elias's limits. But he fought not just for survival, he fought for Ayla, for Zenara, and for everyone counting on him to succeed. Just when it seemed like the tide might turn against them, Ayla suddenly unfurled her wings. To everyone's astonishment, she lifted off the ground, hovering momentarily before unleashing a burst of gravitational force that sent the commander crashing to the floor. His armor cracked under the strain, and he lay motionless, stunned. "What was that?" Elias asked, staring at Ayla in amazement. "I don't know," she admitted, her voice trembling. "Something inside me awakened during captivity. I can manipulate gravity, but only for short bursts." "That's incredible," Zenara said, awe evident in her tone. "You could be our greatest weapon against the Krill." Ayla shook her head firmly. "No, I don't want to be a weapon. I want to help us survive, to ensure no one else suffers like we have." Her words resonated deeply with Elias. They weren't fighting to become oppressors. They were fighting to end oppression. Together, they regrouped and fled the facility, rejoining their allies outside. As they disappeared into the night, alarms blared throughout the compound, signaling the Krill's realization that their prisoners had escaped once again. Back at their hidden base within the ancient caves, celebrations erupted among the survivors. Ayla's safe return reignited their spirits, proving that even in the darkest moments, unity and courage could prevail. Yet amidst the joy, Elias couldn't ignore the weight of what they'd uncovered during the rescue mission. While searching the commander's quarters, Kel had discovered classified data detailing the Krill Empire's next target, Earth. Years of conflict had weakened humanity's defenses, leaving the planet vulnerable to invasion. Worse still, the Krill planned to use experimental super soldiers, created by fusing alien DNA with advanced cybernetics, to crush any remaining resistance. "This changes everything," Elias said grimly as he gathered his closest allies in the Central Chamber. "If we don't stop them now, Earth won't stand a chance." Zenara studied the holographic projections displaying the Krill fleet's trajectory. "Then we must strike first," she declared, using the quantum disruptor aboard the space station. "But activating it requires accessing the station directly," Kel reminded them. "And getting there won't be easy." Elias clenched his fists, resolve hardening in his gaze. "We didn't come this far to give up now. We'll take the fight to them, even if it means risking everything." Ayla stepped forward, her wings twitching nervously, but her expression resolute. "Then let's do it together, for all of us." With renewed purpose, the group finalized their plan. They would launch a daring assault on the space station, infiltrating its defenses with a combination of stealth and brute force. Each member had a role to play. Zenara would decipher the disruptor's activation sequence. Ayla would use her newfound abilities to disable enemy forces, and Elias would lead the charge alongside Terra's allies. As dawn broke over the desert, casting golden light across the horizon, Elias felt a sense of inevitability settle over him. Their journey had been fraught with challenges, sacrifices, and revelations, but it had also forged unbreakable bonds. Together, they had transformed from scattered survivors into a united front capable of standing against tyranny. Little did they know, their actions would soon ignite a galactic uprising, one that would challenge the very foundations of the Krill Empire and redefine the meaning of hope for countless worlds. The desert sun blazed overhead as Elias and his growing coalition prepared for their next move. The revelation that Earth was the Krill Empire's next target weighed heavily on everyone's minds. Time was running out, and failure wasn't an option, not when billions of lives hung in the balance. Elias stood atop a rocky outcrop overlooking their makeshift encampment. Below him, groups of survivors worked tirelessly to fortify defenses, repair equipment, and train for the upcoming battle. Among them were refugees from half a dozen species, each contributing their unique skills and strengths to the cause. Yet despite their progress, Elias knew they couldn't face the Krill alone. They needed allies, powerful ones. "We need more than just scattered survivors," Zinera said, joining him at the edge of the outcrop. Her bioluminescent patterns flickered softly, casting a calming glow over the harsh landscape. "If we're going to take down the space station and activate the quantum disruptor, we'll need support from other oppressed worlds." Elias nodded thoughtfully. "You're right. But how do we convince them to join us? Most have been beaten into submission by the Krill. They won't risk everything unless they believe victory is possible." Ayla approached cautiously, her wings folded tightly against her back. Since discovering her ability to manipulate gravity, she had become increasingly self-conscious about her newfound power. Yet there was no denying its potential value in rallying others to their side. Maybe I can help," she offered hesitantly. "If I show them what we're capable of, maybe they'll see hope where they once saw despair." Her suggestion sparked an idea in Elias's mind. "That's it," he said, turning to face her with renewed determination. "We'll travel to nearby settlements and demonstrate our strength, not through violence, but through unity. We'll prove that together we can fight back." Over the next several days, Elias, Ayla, Zinara, and a small team of trusted companions embarked on a mission to unite the oppressed. Their first destination was a hidden enclave nestled deep within a canyon, a refuge for survivors of Arian, Ayla's homeworld. When they arrived, they found the community living in fear, their spirits crushed by years of subjugation. At first, the Aryans were wary of outsiders, but when Ayla stepped forward, her wings unfurling majestically in the sunlight, whispers of recognition rippled through the crowd. She spoke passionately about her captivity, her rescue, and the rebellion brewing across the galaxy. Then, to drive her point home, she demonstrated her gravitational abilities, lifting massive boulders effortlessly before setting them gently back on the ground. The effect was immediate. Hope ignited in the eyes of those who had long given up on freedom. Dozens pledged to join the cause, bringing with them advanced engineering knowledge and aerial combat expertise. Ayla's people weren't warriors by nature, but desperation had taught them resilience. And now, under her leadership, they were ready to rise up. Encouraged by their success, the group moved on to Lumina's Remnants, an underwater settlement hidden beneath a vast ocean. Here, Zinera took the lead, communicating with her kin using intricate patterns of light. She revealed fragments of the ancient artifacts data, showing evidence of the Krill's plans to invade Earth. The Luminans listened intently, their shimmering forms glowing brighter with every word. When Zinera concluded her speech, one elder stepped forward. "Our ancestors fought for peace, not war," he said solemnly. "But if war is what it takes to reclaim our future, then so be it. We will stand with you." By the time they reached the final settlement, a rugged colony of Terra's people, their ranks had swelled significantly. The reptilian warriors greeted them with skepticism at first, their scales bristling defensively. But when Elias recounted Takara's sacrifice and shared intel about the Krill's experiments, their stance softened. One by one, they knelt in tribute to her memory, vowing to honor her bravery by joining the rebellion. With their coalition strengthened, the group returned to the caves to finalize preparations for the assault on the space station. Engineers worked around the clock to retrofit scavenged ships with weapons and shields, while strategists pored over maps and schematics. Every detail mattered, from timing their approach to ensuring communication lines remained secure during the attack. As the day of reckoning drew near, tensions ran high. Many questioned whether their Ragdig fleet could withstand the Krill's superior firepower. Others worried about leaving loved ones behind, knowing some might not return. Yet amidst the uncertainty, a sense of camaraderie prevailed. These beings, once divided by species and circumstance, had forged bonds stronger than steel through shared suffering and purpose. On the eve of the mission, Elias gathered his closest allies in the central chamber. Ayla, Zinara, Kale, Mira, Dax, and representatives from each allied faction sat in a circle, their faces illuminated by flickering torchlight. For a moment, no one spoke, the weight of what lay ahead pressing heavily on all of them. Finally, Elias broke the silence. "Tomorrow, we strike at the heart of the Krill Empire. It won't be easy. Some of us may not make it, but if we succeed, we'll cripple their operations and give oppressed worlds a fighting chance. More importantly, we'll show the galaxy that resistance is possible, that even in the darkest times, hope can spark change." Ayla nodded, her wings twitching slightly. "And we'll do it together," she added firmly. "No matter what happens, we'll stand united." Zinara's patterns brightened in agreement. "For freedom," she said softly, echoing words spoken earlier. "For freedom," the others repeated, their voices blending into a chorus of defiance. The following morning, the coalition launched their fleet into orbit. Dozens of ships, patched together from salvaged parts and fueled by determination, streaked across the sky like shooting stars. As they approached the space station, its imposing silhouette loomed larger with each passing second. Armed turrets swiveled toward them, plasma cannons charging ominously. "This is it," Elias said over the comms, addressing the entire fleet. "Stay focused, stay sharp, and remember why we're here. For Earth, for our homeworlds, for freedom." With that, the battle began. Plasma bolts streaked through space as the coalition engaged the Krill defenders head-on. Pilots maneuvered their ships with precision, dodging enemy fire while launching counterattacks. Ground teams boarded the station via drop pods, breaching hulls, and securing key entry points. Inside, chaos reigned. Ayla used her gravitational powers to disable automated defenses, creating openings for her comrades to advance. Zinara coordinated troop movements using her light-based signals, guiding units through labyrinthine corridors. Meanwhile, Elias led a strike team straight for the quantum disruptor's control room, cutting down Krill soldiers with relentless efficiency. Yet despite their efforts, resistance proved fierce. Reinforcements poured in from every direction, forcing the coalition to adapt quickly. At one point, a squad of elite Krill warriors cornered Elias's team, pinning them down with overwhelming firepower. Just when it seemed like all hope was lost, reinforcements arrived. Aryan pilots swooping in with aerial support, Luminan engineers disabling blast doors remotely, and reptilian warriors charging in with brute force. Together, they pushed forward, inch by bloody inch, until finally reaching the disruptor's core chamber. Inside, the device hummed ominously, surrounded by layers of security systems designed to prevent unauthorized access. Kale immediately set to work bypassing the locks, his fingers flying across holographic interfaces. "Hurry," Elias urged, keeping watch as Krill forces closed in. "I'm almost there," Kale replied, sweat dripping from his brow. With a triumphant shout, he activated the final sequence. The disruptor powered up, emitting a pulse of energy that rippled outward, disabling Krill ships and stations across the sector. Cheers erupted throughout the fleet as the tide of battle turned decisively in their favor. For the first time in decades, the oppressed peoples of the galaxy dared to dream of a future free from tyranny. But Elias knew their fight wasn't over yet. The Krill Empire wouldn't surrender easily, and countless battles still lay ahead. Still, as he looked around at the diverse faces of his allies, he felt a surge of pride. Together, they had proven that unity could overcome even the most daunting odds. The quantum disruptor's pulse rippled across the sector like a shockwave, disabling Krill ships and stations in its wake. Plasma cannons fell silent, automated turrets ceased firing, and entire fleets of drones plummeted lifelessly into space. For a moment, the battlefield was eerily quiet, a fleeting pause before chaos erupted anew. Elias stood at the center of the disruptor's control room, his chest heaving as adrenaline coursed through his veins. Around him, his team worked feverishly to secure the chamber, ensuring no counterattack could undo their hard-won victory. Ayla hovered near the entrance, her wings shimmering faintly as she monitored the corridor for signs of reinforcements. Zinara remained close to Kale, assisting him with final adjustments to stabilize the disruptor's energy output. Every second counted. If the Krill managed to regain control, they would retaliate with devastating force. Outside, the coalition fleet seized the opportunity to press their advantage. Pilots executed daring maneuvers, targeting vulnerable points on crippled Krill vessels, while ground teams secured additional sections of the station. Refugees-turned-soldiers fought alongside seasoned warriors, their unity transforming them into an unstoppable force. Even those who had once doubted their ability to stand against the Empire now charged forward with unshakable resolve. Yet amidst the triumph, Elias couldn't ignore the cost. Lives had been lost, brave souls who had sacrificed everything for the cause. He clenched his fists tightly, vowing silently that their deaths wouldn't be in vain. "We finish this," he muttered under his breath, determination burning brighter than ever. As the disruptor stabilized, Kale turned to Elias, his face pale but triumphant. "It's done," he said. "The Krill's operations are crippled. Without this station, their ability to coordinate attacks is severely diminished. That buys us time," Elias replied grimly. "But it doesn't end the war. The Krill Empire won't give up easily." "No," Zinara interjected softly, her bioluminescent patterns flickering with urgency. "But it gives others hope. Worlds that have suffered under their rule will see what we've accomplished. And they'll rise up too." Her words struck a chord within Elias. This wasn't just about defeating the Krill. It was about inspiring rebellion across the galaxy. By crippling their stronghold, they had sent a message loud and clear. Oppression could be resisted, and freedom was worth fighting for. With the disruptor secured, the group prepared to evacuate the station. As they moved through the corridors, Elias noticed something unusual, a faint hum emanating from a nearby chamber. Curiosity piqued. He motioned for Ayla and Zinara to follow him inside. What they found astonished them. A massive database containing decades' worth of intelligence gathered by the Krill Empire. Blueprints for weapons systems, maps of resource-rich planets, and detailed records of enslaved populations filled holographic displays. "This could change everything," Zinara whispered, her eyes wide with awe. "If we share this information with other worlds, they can prepare defenses and launch coordinated strikes against the Krill, and expose their crimes to the galaxy," Ayla added fiercely. "Let everyone see the truth about what they've done." Elias nodded, understanding the significance of their discovery. "We'll take it with us," he said firmly. "Every piece of data counts." Back aboard their flagship, the coalition regrouped to assess their next steps. The battle had left them battered but victorious, their spirits buoyed by the knowledge that they had dealt a crippling blow to the Krill Empire. Yet as celebrations began among the crew, Elias felt a pang of melancholy. So much had been sacrificed to reach this point. Lives, homes, innocence. Could they truly rebuild what had been destroyed? His thoughts were interrupted by Ayla, who approached him hesitantly. Elias, thank you, she said softly, for believing in me, in all of us. He smiled gently, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. You didn't need my belief, Ayla. You carried hope within you all along. That's why we succeeded. Zenara joined them moments later, her glowing patterns reflecting warmth and gratitude. What happens now? She asked. Do we return to our homeworlds, or do we keep fighting? We do both, Elias replied confidently. Some of us will go back to help rebuild. Others will continue spreading the message, to inspire more worlds to join the fight. But no matter where we go, we stay united. This isn't the end. It's only the beginning. In the weeks that followed, the coalition dispersed across the galaxy, carrying news of their victory to every corner. Survivors who had once lived in fear now dared to dream of liberation. Uprisings erupted on countless worlds, fueled by the courage of those who refused to bow to tyranny. The Krill Empire, weakened and disorganized, struggled to maintain control as rebellion spread like wildfire. On Earth, humanity rallied behind the coalition's efforts, bolstering their defenses and preparing to reclaim their place among the stars. Leaders emerged from unlikely places, young engineers, former slaves, and ordinary citizens united by a shared vision of a better future. Together, they forged alliances with alien species, learning to coexist and cooperate in ways never thought possible. For Elias, Ayla, and Zenara, the journey took on new meaning. They traveled between worlds, offering guidance and support wherever needed. Along the way, they discovered that their bonds transcended species and language. They were family, bound not by blood, but by shared experiences and unwavering trust. One evening, as they sat beneath the twin moons of a newly liberated planet, Elias reflected on how far they'd come. From a lone human soldier stranded in the desert to leaders of a galactic uprising, their story had become a beacon of hope for countless beings. You know, Elias said quietly, breaking the peaceful silence, we started this because we wanted to survive. But now I think we found something even greater. What's that? Ayla asked curiously. Purpose, Elias replied simply. A reason to keep going, no matter how hard things get. Because when we fight for each other, for freedom, for justice, we create something stronger than any empire. Zenara nodded, her patterns glowing softly in agreement. And together, we can build a future where no one has to live in fear again.